somebody asked me, they said, I want to know about your strategy for YouTube, because I said I was putting these live chats, these live streams up on YouTube. And I said, I'll tell you what my YouTube strategy is: zero. I put zero importance in YouTube. For that matter, TikTok, I put very little importance on. As a cartoonist, I am putting some of these live chat clips up on both of those. But again, almost more as a kind of as seeing if there's any there after all this time. And also B, just as a service. Like, I think we talk about a lot of good stuff here. So it was worth my time to go through Saturday and take last week's live stream, annotate it, put it up there with a clickable table of contents. So if you were just looking for information on one topic, you could go directly to it. That was more just because I think this is useful. I think this is valuable. And I'd like to be able to make it accessible for people who are looking for answers. If you would have told me 5 years ago that I would come to a complete stop on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I'd have told you were nuts. I wouldn't have been happy with the engagement I was getting on any one of those platforms. But if you would have told me I was going to go to a full stop on all of them, I wouldn't have believed you. Yet here we are. I've gone through and deleted all of my content on Twitter. I don't use it anymore after 15 years. Instagram, I've always been down on, and I finally just gave up on that. Facebook, I've been throttling back for a long time. I got to a point where I realized I hadn't posted on Facebook for such a long time. It must be freeing? Yes and no. Because number one, it's very easy to do when you come to grips with the fact that you're not getting any engagement on those platforms, right? You have pretend numbers that you can pretend is your followers, but you know for a fact, for example, on Twitter, when you put a message out on Twitter, you know you're not reaching all of those followers. You're not reaching a quarter of them or a tenth of them. You're reaching a percentage of those followers. Same thing on Instagram. Instagram is even worse, though, because it won't let you link out. And Twitter did. I'm pretty sure they'd throttle a link, but Instagram won't even allow it. We've been tracking between Dave Kellett on the Comic Lab podcast and myself. We've been tracking our Kickstarters, and we were using referral tags to a granular level, very, very studiously using referral tags to see where our pledges was coming from. And what we found out was that things like Twitter and particularly Instagram were delivering almost no pledges. And at the end of the day, when it comes down to using social media, that's the whole reason we post on social media, so that at some point you can do a Kickstarter or a Patreon or what have you, some crowdfunding outfit, and direct traffic to that crowdfunding opportunity. If you can't direct traffic, there is zero reason to be on social media unless you get a kick out of that kind of thing. And I don't know about you, but the sparkle has worn off of that a long time ago for me. So if you listen to the Comic Lab podcast, you heard Dave talk about his most recent one, and he realized that we took the number of his followers and the number of pledges that those followers generated on his last Kickstarter program, and we made a conversion rate, right? So out of 40,000 Instagram followers, they generated one Kickstarter pledge. And that's a conversion rate of 0.00025%. That's less than insignificant. Twitter was a little bit better. He had 10,000 followers. They delivered 2 Kickstarter backers. That's a conversion rate of 0.02%. Okay. Bluesky, where he had just started a number of months ago and has 4,300 followers, generated 46 Kickstarter backers. That's a conversion rate of 1.06%. In other words, we actually did the math. I don't have to explain it to you. It's exponentially. It's like something like 40. Blue Sky was 42,000 times better than Instagram was. And remember, Dave had 40,000 people on Instagram, but he didn't really. Those were pretend numbers. Those numbers are meaningless. So once you realize that the numbers you're presented with on social media are meaningless, and the only thing that counts is your ability to convert, send people a Kickstarter, send people a Patreon, send people to where you're selling your book, et cetera, et cetera. That is what's important. Okay. So when we both saw those numbers, and by the way, my Kickstarter for my last two books that I put out, Evil Inc., similar numbers. Facebook didn't even register. Okay. So we've both come to a complete stop on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And the thing about it is, this last Kickstarter that Dave did, it was with Twitter and Instagram completely shut down. Those conversion rates were from his previous Kickstarter. Okay. So that's what we're comparing to Blue Sky. But the important thing for you to note is that he shut down Twitter and Instagram completely, and he had his second best Sheldon themed Kickstarter in history, right? So he's got two books. One is Drive, one is Sheldon. Sheldon is the short form comedy, and Drive is long form sci fi. This was the second highest Sheldon Kickstarter in his entire career. And the guy's done like a dozen or so, maybe more, Kickstarters. He's very good at this. He's been doing it a long time. When he realized that he was getting no engagement, it became very simple to shut that down and to focus on those platforms that are delivering results. So the question is, which platforms right now in 2025 on social media are delivering results? The answer to that is Blue Sky and the one I'm on right now, Substack. Those are the two that I think I can justify 100% putting all of my interest, all my energy in to build audience and to communicate. Okay. Uh, Full stop on all the others. YouTube, I think I really have problems. If you think you're going to make anything happen on YouTube, it is you can see for years, especially if for those of you, we get letters at Comic Lab all the time. Can you talk a little bit about monetizing on YouTube? No, no, because it's a completely fallacious argument. The moment that creators do start to build monetization on YouTube, they change the rules and all of a sudden it goes poof. And we've seen them do that time after time. Why would you build your castle on their sand when you know that they have a reputation of doing this? TikTok's no better. TikTok is no better. All you've got to, and by the way, prove it to yourself. Just say on TikTok, hey, come on over and join me on Patreon. I'm doing this thing. You'll get crickets. Okay. I can see efficacy on Blue Sky and Substack when I'm directing traffic. That's the only important thing. I've got 12,000 followers on TikTok. Ostensibly, it's my highest, should be my strongest social media, right? It delivers bupkis. Okay, so and by the way, take that from one guy. If you get good results, I see Corey says YouTube has great reach and a long tail. Fantastic, Corey. If you are able to on YouTube say, go over to my Patreon and see people showing up, then you keep using YouTube. Uh, I haven't had that experience, Corey. That has not happened for me. I'm thrilled if it's happened for you. And those are the numbers that are important. Your Patreon numbers. I did a consultation with not a web host. It was a podcast host, and they were showing me all their analytics and stuff. And, aren't these analytics very important? And I said, no, they're meaningless numbers. And they go, what do you mean? I said, yeah, the line goes up, the line goes down, the line goes up, the line goes down. It's meaningless. They say, what? But when the line goes up, that means you're getting more listeners. Isn't that important? And I said, no. And again, they look at me like I've got, snails crawling out of my ears. And I've had that problem fixed for weeks. And they said, why not? I said, the only numbers that count are my Patreon numbers. If my Patreon numbers are going up, I'm doing good. And that number on your host can go up and down and up and down and up and down. And unless that corresponds to Patreon or Kickstarter or book sales or what have you, then it's meaningless. I look at one number. It's my Patreon number. All the other stuff is bupkis. Okay. So that's what I meant at the end of last week's show when I was saying, my YouTube strategy was zero. It really is. The only reason I'm there at all is kind of as a service, because I think these live streams have really good information for people. I think other than that, I wouldn't do it. And the only reason I'm on TikTok is literally Substack does a fantastic job of they literally, when I'm done with the live stream or the live stream, they generate the clips. And they're really good. I only have to touch them up a little bit. They generate these clips. Well, at that point, they're generating the clips. It's literally 5 seconds for me to put them up on TikTok. It's meaningless. TikTok, again, I've gotten nothing. It's been, those 5 seconds have been 5 wasted seconds. And that becomes really important. What happens is, and this is my same argument about against going to comic conventions. You want to hear me on a rant, get me going on how dumb it is to go to comic conventions. We get into a gambler's mentality. We get into this situation where we've got to go. We've got to go. It's going to happen next. And we had a big day yesterday, and I got a whole bunch of engagement. That's going to happen again. And they get you into this gambler's mentality where they keep you pumping content onto their platform when it's not actually doing anything for you. Okay. That's a big problem. And this is my full-time job. Being a cartoonist is the only thing that I do. Okay, I was able to leave my day job back in 2012. The only reason I was able to stay at that level, the only reason I was able to continue to do full-time comics is partly time management. And that meant not getting caught up in things that weren't delivering me engagement, things that weren't important to me. Angela says, I did 4 days at Emerald City and made the same amount of sales as I did at a one-day event about books hosted by my local library system. Yeah, and that's what I really want to encourage anybody thinking about going to a comic convention is to do the real math. If you want to do a comic convention, at least do yourself the favor of doing the actual math. And what I mean by that is you count up all of your costs. And that includes the costs of the promotional materials that you printed to be at the booth. That means the cost of the books, unless they were kickstarted and they're free and clear. If you had to buy those books, if you had to buy them from a digital printer and have them sent out. If you're one of these people, and I see them on social media all the time, that they say the most horrible thing in the world. I just got accepted by XYZ comic convention. Now I've got to decide what to bring. Now I've got to print some things to bring. You should not be going to a comic convention unless you have a storage area full of things to sell. If you're trying to think of what to bring to the convention after you get accepted to the convention, you've got the cart before the horse. And you're going to lose money, and you're going to sink into credit card debt, and it's going to make it harder when you finally are ready to transition into a full-time or at least a higher step on the pro-am level. It's going to make it harder for you to do that. Okay, so do the math, add up all of your costs, the travel costs, the hotel costs. Eating out is expensive now more than ever. Add up all those costs and then subtract that from what you made at the show. You see people doing this, and by the way, they're not kidding anyone else. They're kidding themselves. They say, "Oh, I made $5,000 at the con this weekend." You hear people say that. You see them say that on social media quite a bit. I made this amount of money. But then if you are enough of an asshole to ask them, that's great, how much did you spend? You find out they spent 6,000. That's a real problem. That's a real problem. You didn't make $5,000. You went in the hole 1,000. That's a problem. And then gambler's mentality takes over, and you say, well, I didn't do really good this week at the convention, but I'm scheduled for one next month. This week, I got a bad place on the floor. So, it's just luck of the draw. But next week, I'm going to do better. And then you get into gambler's mentality when it comes to comic conventions, where you go to one show and you lose money. You go to the next show and you gain money. You go to the next show and you lose money. By the end of the year, you've lost money because that's the way gambling works. The house always wins. Plus, and Angela brings up a good point, plus the cost of all the time that you waste getting to the convention, being at the convention, coming back, being sick afterwards because nobody washes their hands. All that time, what I found out in 2017, time away from my studio was costing my business. And so at the end of the day, I had to take that into account. In 2017, I used to go to upwards at my height, 12 comic conventions a year. 2017, again, took the same look at comic conventions that I looked at when it came to social media. What is the net positive? What's the return on investment for this? And I realized I was losing money at these shows. 2017, I quit comic conventions completely, and it was the first year I turned a really noticeable profit on my work. And I did that by staying home and getting the work done and working things like Patreon and Kickstarter. That was a big turning point for me. That's why I'm so passionate about telling people don't do comic conventions unless you have a clear pathway towards success. Now, I did one just last month. I did one in March. It was walking distance from my house. The National Cartoonist Society had a booth, and so I didn't spend money on that. I got that through my membership at the National Cartoonist Society. It was one day. I made basically enough money I made as the same amount of money as I spent on my NCS membership, about $200, which basically at that point, the NCS paid for itself. And it was a nice afternoon, and I walked away perfectly happy. But if you don't have a clear pathway to success, and that means, one of those major costs have to be eliminated, travel or hotel. And then you see those costs come. Now you can start to think about it. But still, you're getting caught up in gambler's mentality. My opinion is you'd be smarter to stay home and get more work done. In the time that it takes you to do a convention, you could get a little mini comic. You could get a project done. You could do a side project to drive your Patreon. You could do a lot of things with that time. Okay. Going to conventions, unless you're making bank, is a dumb idea. So Rich says, I've learned it's not best to have officially launched a Patreon unless you have X amount of followers or a pre-established. Yes. Oh, yes. And I'm not a Coffee or Ko-Fi. I'm not a big fan of that. Here's the problem. Let's talk about this. But if you're doing something like Patreon or Ko-Fi or Coffee, whatever, however it is, in other words, and this goes for Substack subscriptions too. Very, very important. This goes for all of it. It doesn't matter the name you put on it. It doesn't matter the logo you've got on it. Everything you need to know about crowdfunding comes from the word. First comes the crowd, then comes the funding. Okay. And if you don't have the crowd, you're not going to get the funding. We're in our 7th year of Comic Lab, and we get this all the time from people where they clearly started their Patreon too soon before they had a crowd. And here's what happens. They start their Patreon, they're not ready, and they get one they get one Patreon backer. Now they've got it. Now, not only is that depressing to only get one Patreon backer, they're serving their Patreon rewards to one Patreon backer. And this is the part that spells death for your creativity. They're engineering all of their Patreon, all of their content, Patreon, on Patreon, off Patreon, they're engineering all of their content towards getting 2 Patreon backers, doubling their numbers. By the way, 2 Patreon backers is also horrible, right? But they're making all their creative decisions with an eye on that Patreon counter. And they're killing their creativity. They're making bad creative decisions, number one, because they got their eye off the ball. And number two, they're making decisions that are not based in reality. They're constantly looking at this number on Patreon that's 1 or 2 or 3 or 10. And the problem is they're getting depressed because every week that goes by that they don't see that Patreon number jump, they think they're failing. They're not failing. They're in the midst of audience building. It's a very important part of the bigger picture. And we've all got to do it. We've all got to go through audience building. We've all got to build that crowd before we can fund that crowd. But they're getting depressed because they've got really low Patreon numbers and they think they're failing when really they're just in a learning process. And it's a vicious circle because the problem with that is they're not learning. They're not doing the learning they should do because they're focusing all their attention on going from 1 Patreon backer to 2, from 2 to 3. And that means they are completely taking their creativity maybe into the wrong direction because they're trying to serve those 3 people that are there that may not even be paying a complete attention. Okay. So starting and by the way, it's the same thing. Everything that I said from that, you can apply to the other crowdfunding platforms that generate ongoing support, like Ko-Fi, Coffee, Patreon, a PayPal donation button, all of those things. It takes your eye off the ball, and it's depressing. Yes, we've heard so many people write into Comic Lab who are experiencing this kind of depression that they think they're failures. And really, it's like and we've said this on the show, turn that Patreon off right now. Turn it off completely. You weren't ready for it. You didn't have your crowd. You went for the funding. You learned what we said. Now turn it off. Okay? It's better for you in the long run. Mr. Fondini, so if you don't have an audience and you're currently starting up a project, what would be a good approach to providing content to build the audience that doesn't pull from your creation time? I'm not sure I understand the question. A good approach to providing content to build the audience that doesn't pull from your creation time. So on the Substack, on my Substack, the Webcomics Handbook, I've got a great post. And by the way, Mr. Fondini, if I take this in the wrong direction, just let me know. But I'm going to assume I'm picking up what you're laying down there. I've got a great post on the Webcomics Handbook Substack that says like 15 things to post when you don't know what to post. There's something along those lines. And what it is this conversation that I'm going to go into next. I post between 25 and 31 times a month for my Patreon backers. Patreon's my most important thing. Those people who are my paid backers are the most important members of my audience. And if my sweet spot is a $12 Patreon pledge. If you're going to be on my Patreon at $12 a month, I need to bring the content. Now, does that mean that I'm posting between 25 and 31 posts, individual comics for my Patreon backers? No, I'm doing almost the same exact kind of output that I always did. I'm good for about a page a day on Evil Inc. Usually, a page a week for Evil Inc. Usually about a page a week for After Dark, and 2 or 3 commissions. Well, as you can see, that's not going to get me to my 25. So what do I do to do what Mr. Fondini is talking about, building, putting, and by the way, this I'm doing this on Patreon. You could do this on social media if you're solidly in audience building mode. Okay. What do I do to post? So I have that regular posting schedule that I need if I'm going to be building audience. I can't post a new comic at that rate. Well, this article that I put up on my Substack talks about all the things that you can do that your audience loves. That's great for audience building. That doesn't mean doing a whole new comic. In fact, what it means is taking parts of that comic that you're working on, integrating that and using that for other posts. Here's a great example. People love time lapse videos. They love watching art come to life. They love watching people draw. If you're working in Clip Studio, it's got time lapse recording software built into the software. So you can just set it. It causes almost no, I can say it causes no lag for me. Your computer may be different, but it doesn't cause any lag. And at the end, you can download a very simple time-lapse video of the whole drawing process of the comic that you were working on. Now, you can take that, you can set it to music. I set it to a clip from the Comic Lab podcast. Again, didn't do anything new. It was all stuff that I'd already done. This is important. I took that Comic Lab clip, maybe a funny little moment in there, put it against the time lapse, and put it up for my Patreon backers. Here's a time lapse of me drawing that cartoon about the Halloween witch. And you might enjoy. I'd also on Comic Lab told a story about when I tried to buy a grill at Lowe's Home Improvement. Okay. It took very little extra time to do. It was all stuff that was part of my ongoing projects that I already have time laid out in my week for. And it makes a great little audience builder. You've got more stuff than you realize. Sketches. People like to see your sketch. The unfinished work. Sketches are great. I've got I forget now, and you can tell my head's not great with numbers, between 12 and 15. These are go-to ideas that you can use to post things so you're not doing extra work. In other words, Mr. Fondini, you're not taking away from the time it takes you to do those comics that you want to do. This is all stuff that is basically sharing process, sharing tips and tutorials, things that you might be able to share. It's actually very, very simple. Newsletter material, again, the big thing with newsletters, if you're on Substack, you're probably screwing this up. Don't write more than 500 words for your newsletter. Why? You're not that interesting. All right. That's okay. I learned the hard way. Neither am I. 500 words. Now, this is going to do a couple of things. Number one, it's going to keep you focused to maybe just one topic or two topics, and that's okay. It's going to keep things nice and focused, put lots of visuals on there because, again, you're a cartoonist. I got to always remind cartoonists that they're visual and keep it to 500 words. That's all that they want to hear from you anyway. They're busy. They got other things going. If you go to your Substack and look at your open rate, you're going to see a number that's probably below 30%. Okay. Meaning they saw your email. They didn't even want to click and find out what you were talking about. Might have had something to do with the headline you wrote. We can talk about that later too. But nice and short. Now, what does that do? If you're only writing 500 words on your Substack newsletter, that means you got lots of stuff for the next one and the next one. I see people make this mistake all the time. They write this long email newsletter that no one's ever going to read. And then I don't hear from them for 2 months because they don't know what to write. That's because they used it all up on one newsletter that nobody read. I hate magic number advice. 500 words. That's one I'll give you. Keep it to 500 words. And then you can see how you can easily meet this stuff out and share it with your readers. Anytime I get a chance to reuse something that I've already used, I repackage based on theme. All through Halloween, hey, everybody, here's all of the Halloween cartoons that I did that had witches on them. And just beep, 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 beep. I didn't do anything new. I just repackaged what I had. For my Kickstarter, I do artist editions. That means if you buy a book at a certain level, I'll do a little illustration for you based on your request. Well, I don't just do those. I do those and then I scan them in and I've got them in a folder. And then usually on the weekends for my Patreon backers, I'll share one of those artist editions. Didn't do anything new for it. It was all just stuff that along the process of my doing what I do, I make sure that I can use it 2 or 3 other times. And that's how I'm able to keep my Patreon backers with new content, new rewards for having joined us on our community day after day after day after day. That's really important. That's if you go to my Substack, you're gonna. That's a really good one to look up. And I'll see if I can put the link in when this posts later for everybody. I'll put the link in there so you can find it. It's really important. But you can really uh, you can really do a lot with the stuff that's just part of your process. You can get a lot of rewards, a lot of audience building. The other thing is follow me on Bluesky. Right now, I am posting because I believe so strongly in what I'm seeing on Bluesky, the engagement, the audience building, all kinds of stuff there. And I've got some Bluesky audience building strategies, specific strategies on the Webcomics Handbook Substack you should definitely look into. But I post about 80 times a week on Bluesky. I'm using a scheduler, obviously. Uh, but am I really going through all of that trouble and making new stuff for every post? Of course I'm not. Of course I'm not. Right. Uh, Part of it, I've got a little bit of advantage because I've been doing this for 25 years. So I've got a 25-year archive. So what do I do? Again, on the weekends, I wake up before anybody in my house is awake and I get most of this stuff done Saturday morning. I'll go through and I've got something called This Date in Evil Ink History. And I'll go and I'll put in to my filing system April 30th. And I'll get all of the comics that ran on April 30th, either in 2015 or 2022, what have you. If I find a good one that's worth sharing, I'll put that into the scheduler and I'll say, This Date in Evil Ink History, April 30th, 2015. These two characters had a walk and they shared an ice cream cone or whatever, say a little something to get the person interested in actually reading the darn thing. You'd have to do better than an ice cream cone, but I'm on a roll here. So the main point is repackage, reuse, repurpose. By all means, you've got to think outside of the box. If you're trying to come up with something new, remember what I always say, social media does not reward creativity. It rewards consistency. That's why I'm posting consistently all throughout. Vaughn Fox says, you had me on ice cream. That's why I'm posting consistently throughout the day on Bluesky. If you'd like to see an answer to your question, Mr. Fondini, follow me on Bluesky. Just go to my profile and look at what I'm posting throughout the day. You'll see a very distinct pattern. You'll see a very distinct strategy on what I'm doing. Some of the things I'm doing, are straight up engagement. I am asking a question or I'm inviting participation. Today's was, I think, post a panel that represents your comic, right? That is straight up. I just want to engage with you. I just want to talk to you. I just want to make you part of my community that I'm building here. Okay. Those are very easy to do. Okay. And some of them are repurposed stuff from previous projects I've done. And the more you work and the more you do, the more you can exploit these ideas. But that's what I would do if I was trying to build an audience and I didn't want to steal from my creation time. There's tons of these ideas that you can use. And they work. They work all the time. I'm telling you, it always surprises me how well they work because they're real simple. They're real dumb. Again, I was looking for creative. Well, maybe if I can create a side project, maybe if I could create this, create that, create a comic. And really, the thing that really drives a lot of attention, drives a lot of engagement, is kind of the simplest stuff. It just means being consistent. It just means going out there and consistently delivering and being part of that community. What post schedule tools do you use? I'm using Buffer right now. I like it a lot. I've used them all at different times. I've used Hootsuite. I use one called Later. I don't think that there's a advantage or a disadvantage to any of them. You're basically just, especially, here's the deal. I used like Hootsuite and Later, and I stopped using them because I was getting a real sense that Twitter and all these other ones were throttling stuff that was coming in through a third party. Okay. So I'm like, nah, maybe it's not worth my time to do that. I'm not getting that sense yet with Blue Sky. And Blue Sky's enshittification process is going to happen. As much as I love Blue Sky, we all love Blue Sky right now, it's going to take a decline eventually. We have to prepare ourselves for that. That's why by the way, that's why I'm posting 80 times a week on Blue Sky right now, because eventually the engagement and the audience building that's available on Blue Sky right now, it's going to drop as they change their algorithm, as they change their focus from being for creators to being for businesses and advertisers, which is a change that will absolutely 100% come. It's going to come for Substack too. Comes from all. Read Cory Doctorow came up with the term enshittification. He's got a brilliant essay, a bunch of stuff on his site that he's written about it. If you're not familiar with the term, by all means, go and read Cory. We did a Comic Lab episode on the topic that you can find that we discuss and explain what it is. But it's going to happen. That's why, like every now and again, I'll hear from somebody on the Comic Lab podcast say, "Oh, I've got social media fatigue, and I just can't handle going from Twitter to Blue Sky. It's just too much for me." And it's like, listen, I get it. I get it. You need to take the time for self-care. I understand. Here's the consequences of this decision you're making. You are going to miss out on audience building on Blue Sky when it's really, really reactive, really easy to build an audience on Blue Sky right now. Later on, you're going to wish you had just sucked it up and done it, right? And that means, by the way, it doesn't mean you got to do them both. You can shut down very safely. You can shut down, I think, Twitter completely. Oh, but I'll lose all the followers I've got on Twitter. Remember, Uncle Brad tells you those are imaginary numbers. You really don't have those followers. And you want to prove it to you? Just look at your engagement for your next tweet. You don't really have those followers. People, that's the hardest thing to get through to people. I spent all that time. I've got all those followers. You got bupkis. You got nothing. You got something that was a transaction that happened a long time ago. You can switch to Blue Sky, do everything that you were doing on Twitter, do it on Blue Sky. And if you use just a couple of smart social media strategies like the 4 C's of social media and all that stuff that we're always talking about on Comic Lab, you can see your follower count if you want that number to represent audience for you. But more importantly, you can see that engagement go up. You can see traffic being shifted from there to Patreon when you mention it and so forth. So that's why I'm really, really leaning in strong on Blue Sky. That's why I'm using a scheduler. And when I start to get the feeling, or when I can tell from my engagement that Blue Sky has maybe throttled those, then I'll stop using that scheduler and reconfigure my process. But for right now, I'm telling you, I'm very, very strongly in favor of doing a lot of engagement on Blue Sky. The Webcomics Handbook on Substack also has something that I call, I think it's a Blue Sky starter pack strategy for building an audience. A lot of people immediately glommed onto those starter packs, which is great. The starter packs on Blue Sky are very, very powerful. You should be using them. The only problem is everybody used those. For creative people, it amazes me that we can only think in a straight line. If you were a cartoonist, you came up with a starter pack of cartoonists on Bluesky. Straight line, straight as a freaking arrow. And what I started to realize is there's some real opportunities for audience building using these starter packs, but you've got to think orthogonally. You've got to think in a little bit of a diagonal line. If you want to, I don't have time. We're going to be running out of time very shortly. But if you want to learn what that strategy is, go to the Webcomics Handbook on Spotify and look up that Bluesky starter pack strategy. And by the way, I use it myself, and it always amazes me how effective it is. It really, those starter packs are amazing, but you got to stop thinking in a straight line. Let's talk about one of my favorite topics. How do I write humor? Oh man, what a devious, evil question. It's one of the most important questions, especially if you're writing humor. But again, it's one of those things that is really difficult to talk about it. In each book that I wrote about webcomics, the Webcomics Handbook, which you can get at Amazon, the Everything Cartooning book, How to Make Webcomics that I wrote with three of my friends, every one of them has a chapter on writing. And by the way, not for nothing, if there was a cartooning book before those that had chapters on writings, I haven't seen it, right? Every How to Do Comics book before that centered completely on the art. And when I did the Everything Cartooning book back in, good Lord, 2002, 2003, it was a long time ago. I insisted, the publishers didn't want it. And I insisted, I said, it's got to have a chapter on writing. Writing is an important part of cartooning. Nobody wants to talk about it because it's so hard. Everybody loves to talk about the mechanics of drawing, but nobody wants to talk about the fact that part of this is writing. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about how to write humor. And again, it's one of those things that if anybody comes in and says, well, I'll tell you, here's my 3-step process for writing humor. They're crazy. They're crazy. This is something you've got to find your sense of humor. This is something you've got to find your process for. But it's something that we do have some things, having worked with people, not only the comics consultations that I offer, but having taught at the University of the Arts for so long. I have I've worked with people that have been trying to write humor, and I see where the process breaks down. Oh, Angela says Eisner's comics and sequential art seems to have a writing chapter. Fantastic. Well, if anybody was going to do it, it's going to be Will Eisner. The thing about writing humor is I see where the process breaks down for a lot of people. Okay. And that is this. And it sounds very simple, but it's not. One of the key components of humor is surprise. And we don't think about it. But the most important thing to happen at that moment in a punchline in the last panel of a comic strip is surprise. 8 chances out of 10. Like, there's a lot of different types of humor. So nobody can give like a sweeping one size fits all. But in a lot of cases, the problem with the punchline breaking down is it wasn't surprising. And very often, and this happens in the Comic Lab Discord server all the time, this happens in the Comic Lab Discord server all the time. And that is they'll put their character into a situation and they'll have a wonderful setup. They put their character into a real bucket of syrup, as Scott Kurtz says, and then they'll build that. And then in the last panel, where you've got to explode that tension, they have their character do something very logical. Right? If he's going, there was one that we were workshopping a long time ago in the Comic Lab Discord where the person was going up, going trick or treating, and I said, "Here's the thing: in that last panel, I want anything to happen except the person getting candy." right? Because that's what's supposed to happen. I want that person to get, to use the Peanuts example, to get a rock. Or I want there to be an alien behind the door. Or I want the adult to steal the candy. I want anything to happen except for what's supposed to happen, right? And that's where a lot of the humorous potential leaves us, and we lose it because we're not looking to maximize the surprise. Okay. So that's the first thing that I would suggest if somebody was trying to improve their writing, their humor writing, is to ask yourself, how surprising was that? Did I really surprise my readers? Right? That's a big part of it. Now, I'm going to give you, and this is in my book, but I'll, as we're wrapping up the show, this is something that I've used with people, like sitting down with them at university and saying, okay, let's try something. They have a 4-panel comic. Bing, 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 bing. That fourth panel is not working. It's not hitting, right? And so I sit down with them and I say, what happens next? What happens in the very next scene? What if I gave you one more panel? And I'm telling you, time after time after time, they come up with something that was ridiculously funny. And what I find is, especially beginning humor writers, they stop too soon. They stop when they get a spark. Instead of kindling into a flame, they stop when they get a spark. Because it is kind of exciting to get a spark when you're writing a joke. It's like, oh my gosh, I made something happen there. This must be funny. I'm going to run right over to the drawing board and draw it out. And then later on, they see it and they're like, that didn't work. That didn't work quite so well. So, uh, what I want you to do, and this is something I've talked about a lot. Again, I really think once you ideate that thing, you should let it sit for at least a week so that you can look at it cold a week later when you're out of a mindset. Oh man, I wonder if I can go over with this Substack. I've got such a great, it's something I thought a lot about, and it helps with this conversation. So yeah, it's worth going a little bit over for. So first things first, let's wrap up that first conversation. The one more panel method. Now, I've always got to mention this. The whole point of the one more panel method is not to come up with a 5-panel comic, or I don't care about the numbers, but it isn't to come up with a longer comic. The point is, once you find that really funny thing, then you rewrite the comic from the back to the front to go back to its original size. Like if you were writing a 3-panel comic and I said, what would happen uh, uh, in the next panel? And you gave me 4-panel comic, I would want you to rewrite that back into a 3-panel comic to get that setup nice and tight, nice and just crisp. That's where the humor comes from. It isn't about writing a longer comic. It's about writing a better comic. Now, because I tried this, I don't, okay, first of all, I don't know whether Substack's just going to turn me off. It's 2:59. So if it turns me off, I'll just say goodbye now. But on the off chance that I can keep going, here's what I want you to think about. I've tried this on the Comic Lab podcast, but since it's not visual, I just realized I could do this visual. The only thing is, I've got to, I hope I'm doing this in the right order so you can see me, but bear with me. Writing humor is like driving a motorcycle across a chasm, right? Remember Evil Knievel, or if you're old enough to remember Fonzie, right? And you've got a motorcyclist and he's got to go up a ramp. He's got to jump across a chasm and land on a landing ramp on the other side. That is humor. Stay with me. I know it's dumb. Stay with me. The wider the chasm, the funnier the joke, right? If you got a real short chasm, hey, do you want to hear a dirty joke? The boy fell in the mud puddle. Well, that's a little skip. It's not very funny, but you've got no problem. No one's going to fall into the chasm, right? Because it's such a tight chasm. Not very funny, but nobody falls, right? The wider the chasm, the funnier the joke. Now, on your side, you've got a ramp, and that's where you can do all the things that a humorist does to try to make sure that that motorcyclist gets his best jump possible. That means crafting the setup. That means rewriting the punchline so that it's really solid. That means knowing what the punch word is, right? What the most explosive word in the punchline is. 9 chances out of 10, you want to make sure that's the very last word. Everything leads up to that. All of your tension and release, all of the crafting of that joke, the presentation of it, if it's a comic, the composition, the drawing, the word balloons being in the right order, that's all on this ramp. And you've got a lot of control over this ramp. So you can give your motorcyclist the best chance of jumping that chasm. Here's the problem. I'm going to leave our motorcyclist dangling up here. Here's the problem with that. Your audience has a ramp too. Okay. And your audience might not have a very good ramp. And each audience member has a separate ramp. And what happens is, if they don't have the stuff that it takes to process all the stuff that got the motorcyclist up here and land him on the ramp, then that motorcyclist is going to miss the ramp and fall into the chasm. Your joke is going to die. Now, you don't have any control over that, except you've got some choices in jumping the ramp. I'm going to give you a great example. Did you know that kangaroos had 3 vaginas? I know. This is the stuff I spend my time with. Kangaroos have 3 vaginas. Now, I've learned that because I was trying to write a joke about kangaroos. And of course, as you do, you read up on them a little bit. And you're looking for words and phrases about kangaroos that you might be able to work into a joke or something like that. And you're looking at pictures of kangaroos. And I came across the fact that kangaroos have 3 vaginas, right? Of course, the jokes now start to write themselves. There's only one problem. When I let my motorcyclist go, kangaroos have 3 vaginas, and here's the joke I wrote about it. Nobody knows, except for me, that kangaroos have 3 vaginas. So they don't have the landing ramp for that. It's the same thing happens every time I read an XKCD comic. I don't have the landing ramp for that. Now, his audience does. Randall Munroe's audience has the landing ramps for that. And there's enough landing ramps that he makes a very good living catering to his audience. And it's a niche audience. But he also knows that if he does the kangaroo joke to his audience, they're not going to have that landing ramp. They've got the landing ramp for the quadratic equation. Beautiful. But they don't have the kangaroo vagina one. So you've got to take into account not only, boy, I hope this is worth it. I just realized that I may sound like a complete gibbering idiot, but this is something you got to understand. I spend a lot of time alone in this studio. This is something I've spent a lot of time thinking about, talking to myself, is that you've got to think of both ramps. And that's why this is where this is leading to. That's why I want you to spend a week not looking at that joke you wrote. Remember when Evil Knievel jumped 3 Reginas? Ruginas? Oh my gosh. I told you, the jokes write themselves. So here's the thing. Oh, I can't tell you how excited I am to share you my Evil Knievel theory of comedy. It really is. It's something that I've always wanted to share, and it was not getting across on the podcast. But here's the thing. This is why I want you to let that joke sit, because what's going to happen is in a week, you're going to forget about the kangaroo anatomy, and your own ramp is going to be gone. You're going to look at that and you're going to say, what the hell was I thinking? And they, oh yeah, kangaroos and blah, blah, blah. Well, you can't see that when you're in the moment. When you're in the moment, you assume everybody knows what you know. And that's how we all are. We're egocentric, right? Well, I know about the kangaroo, so everybody does. It's common knowledge. Not until a week goes by and you look at that completely cold, can you see where your audience's ramp might be might be breaking down, or where your ramp could be more powerful, more well built. Maybe you've got to adjust the chasm. Maybe you got to bring that chasm in a little bit. That's that's my motorcycle jump theory of comedy. You've got to consider all of those things from your ramp to the chasm to your audience's ramp and understand that sometimes one audience member says, I don't get it. Really, what that means is I don't have the ramp for that. Now, it's dangerous to just hand wave and I don't get it, right? But it is something you need to keep an eye on. You can't live or die by one reader's I don't get it. But at the same time, you've got to know that that might be an indication that there's a whole lot more ramps out there that also weren't able to pick up what you jumped. Okay. Margaret says now you're Googling kangaroos. That's a true thing. That's an absolute true thing. So at least, listen, I don't know that I trust anything I Google anymore, but it's as true as anything that I can find on the internet is that kangaroo theory of vaginas. So now that I've clearly weirded you all out, I'm going to bring this to a close. Thank you so much for showing up. I really enjoyed talking to you about comics today. And Scott reminding me, like and subscribe. Yeah, if you are a subscriber and you can be a free subscriber to the Webcomics Handbook, uh, you will get an instant notification next time we go live. So by all means, do like and subscribe. Smash that like button. Thank you so much. And I will see you next Friday. Bye-bye, everybody.